Thank you very much. Welcome back. How was your spa experience, lunch break, and sauna together? Did you like it? Yeah. We have a very special guest now. We are going to welcome Kristina Schneider here on stage. She has been in and around a topic used to be called web design in the old days. For around about 20 years, she has been organizing and bringing to life conferences like the CSS Conf EU and organizing user groups like the Upfront user group in Berlin. And she is also a teacher at the University of Applied Sciences in Salzburg, which I'm very acquainted with. Please give a very special and warm applause in a second, because this is her first time here in the NEOS community, and we want to greet her very politely and welcome her. Please ask your questions in the app, and afterwards, please rate the talk, and enjoy. Kristina, your applause.
Thank you. Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction. And yeah, I just need a second to say thanks to this community. I was a bit nervous joining here and knowing almost no one, even Sebastian, who invited me. I'd never met in person before. But everyone is so super welcoming, and the organization is really top-notch. I rarely experience such good speaker preparation, and you're a really cool community to get to know. So thanks a lot. Applause for yourself, please. Hi, my name is Kristina, and the reason I'm standing here is I want to bring to you 5 cool tricks doing with CSS that you maybe don't know yet. And also the reason I'm standing here is that I just really like CSS a lot. I've been doing this for, well, almost 2 decades, and since the beginning, since I first saw something appear in the browser after writing a few lines of code, the visual part, seeing my design ideas come to life on the internet, I don't know, it's still giving me a kick. I just really like this part of development. And I want to get to know you a little bit. Who can say the same about themselves? Who really likes CSS? Yeah, not bad at all, some hands. And be honest, who is kind of the opposite, who really hates, well, dislikes CSS? Yeah, expected that. Fair enough. We used to say, for sure, CSS can't do this, can't do that, but now it probably can. And in this talk, I really want to encourage you to start playing around with CSS again, even if you kind of have put it in the archives already, because there's such an interesting time now to learn CSS again. So there's my enthusiasm, but there are also some really hard, good reasons to use CSS. It is changing so quickly. In the last 3 years, we got more features, more additions to the language than in the 10 before that. And the new features are just dropping so fast, it's almost hard to keep up. And I hope even for the super experienced CSS coders among you, I have something new today. And by using CSS, we do what we should do as web developers: separation of concerns, the classic CSS for styling. It's just what it's best at, and we should always use the right tool for the job. Also, I truly believe, because that's kind of my story and also what I'm doing in my team, you can empower your designers to work directly in the medium that they're designing solutions for, the browser. And CSS is a declarative language that is somewhat easy enough to read and to pick up the basics of. So give your designers the power to contribute directly, or at least experiment by building real prototypes in the browser. And lastly, using CSS for some UI patterns these days can save you a lot of time. You can probably get rid of some JavaScript libraries and stop worrying maintaining external code. Also, accessibility features come for free when you use native solutions. You can stop worrying about building everything from scratch. You still have to test it, of course, though. For all of this, we have a name. the rule of least power. And that's something that was coined in the early days of the web by Tim Berners-Lee and others. And the simple idea behind it is, the less power a language has, the more reusable and accessible its outcome will be. So when CSS can solve something, we should probably use it. So as you'll see today, CSS might have become usable for some features where in the past your habit was to reach for JavaScript. So I think it's so much fun. The reason that CSS has become so much bigger in the last years is that the process behind developing and maintaining the language has gotten so much better. It is, of course, maintained by the W3C, which mainly means the main browser vendors, but also invited experts and actual coders who use CSS in their daily work. And one really cool outcome of this process is baseline. You might have noticed this around the web in the last 2 years. And what it is a simple system of badges that are designed to help us web developers to very quickly, at a glance, be able to make a call, can I use this feature in my project today, or is it not ready yet? So when you see orange, the feature has limited availability. It's not supported in all the browsers yet. But as soon as you see blue, or even green, the feature is there. All the core browser engines support it, and if it's green, even for 30 months already. You might have seen this around on MDN, for example. That's how they display it, or on caniuse.com. And this really saves us some time. Like, we don't have to do as much digging to determine if it's ready to be used. Throughout my talk, I will use those baseline badges as well to indicate if something's fine to use. And spoiler, most of the things are. So these are just some of the properties, values, new add rules that have landed in CSS in the recent years. We got things that we previously thought were impossible, like container queries, grid, even subgrid. We have math functions now in CSS, and we have if statements coming. They're being discussed right now. The things I'll focus on today are these. And I'll walk you through 5 examples to make this a bit less abstract. First, I'll show you a quick trick for instantly better typography, and then we'll look at cool stuff we can do with color in CSS. Probably my favorite topic, the parent selector, the has pseudo class, and what we can do with that. Number 4, we'll look at the new popover API and how to position popovers. And lastly, we'll also learn how to transition them in a really easy way. So let's hear about it. I promised a typography improvement, and who's a typography nerd? Anyone? Nice. And those who didn't raise their hand or make a sound, you probably have some typography friends who bug you about not doing something like this, because this heading, that's not great typography. We have those 2 long lines, and then this really short one. It's a detail, but it doesn't look balanced. That's not very elegant. And we can do better. So the reason it looks like this is that's how our browsers work by default. When the text hits the edge of the container, it just wraps to the next line. And then stuff like this can happen. So when we get a designer complaining about this, usually we would explain, well, browsers don't work that way. It's not in design. Just deal with it. Except we have a new tool now. The balance value on the text wrap property. It's just one cheap, super quickly added line, and you have instantly a more sophisticated look for a big, bold display copy. Keep in mind, though, this is computationally expensive for the browser to figure out how to balance your lines. And it only works for 6 in Chrome and Edge and up to 10 lines in Firefox, and don't use it everywhere. You can actually, the browser won't let you. You can only use it on short copy, a heading, a block quote, maybe. Okay, think of your designer friends again. Again, what's wrong with this? Yeah, I think some of you are spotting the sad, lonely word on the last line, a so-called orphan, which again is not very elegant. And for that, we're getting something new as well. The pretty value. Easy to remember, right? So it's a tiny fix, but actually this can do more. So I have an English example here, but what pretty does as well is it avoids overly hyphenated blocks of text, more important in German, for example. And it can also fix those so-called typographic rivers, which you might get on a justified block of text. So pretty useful. And you might even consider adding this to your reset style sheet for instantly better typography on longer bits of text. Balance has landed a while ago everywhere. It's ready to be used. Pretty isn't quite there yet. Not there yet in Firefox, and Safari only has it in a nightly preview, which I think is fine because that's a great example for progressive enhancement. If the text is not perfect yet, well, we'll just wait. The browsers will catch up. Let's talk about color and look at some nice colors. You probably are all working a lot with themes. And one expectation in the world of color theming in the recent years has become that we respect the user's preferences and react to their preference on the color scheme, on the light and dark mode. So I'll walk you through this easy example here to see how we can implement this really easily. Nothing special here, headings, paragraphs, some inputs, and a button. So let's look at this with some CSS code on the side. By the way, if this selector, :root, looks unfamiliar to you, what this does here for my page is basically the same as selecting the HTML element. However, maybe I might not be styling a page, but a component. And then root also selects the outermost element here. And I want, of course, the color scheme be applied to everything. So that's why it's a best practice to put the color scheme and also variables into the root selector. Now, let's switch to a dark color scheme. And there it is. My site is perfectly flipped to a dark color scheme. Well, why is it happening? Well, our browser actually supports dark and light mode out of the box. Unless I declare my own colors, the browser uses just its own user agent styles, and we have a dark theme supported. Now, flipping back to light mode, this is normally, of course, not what we want because, well, we work with the design. We have some brand colors. Black and white usually isn't enough. So let's put some colors in variables here. Again, a new-ish CSS syntax, the double dash syntax. We call them CSS variables, though the proper name are custom properties. And we can use them to store, for example, colors. Really handy, again, on the root selector. I'm not seeing a change yet because I'm not using them, so let's do that. And it's subtle on the projector, but I think you can see my lavender purple color scheme come to life. So one thing that still bugs me are those default blue colors I see on the inputs here on the checkbox and the range input. That's a clash. Luckily, we can fix that with one easy line of CSS2. The accent color property styles exactly those accents in input elements. And just like that, I have a nice, consistent color scheme everywhere. So now when I switch back to dark mode, nothing happens. Well, makes sense, I just declared my own colors and the browser's not gonna overwrite them. So let's zoom in on these variables. There's a really useful new function in CSS called the light-dark function. And it goes like this. You provide two values. The first one styles the variable, or well, the first one styles your color for light mode, and the second for dark mode. Let's do the same on my background and my link color and see what it does to my UI. There we go. I have now defined my own custom dark mode in very few lines of CSS. I think that's pretty cool. Flipping back to light mode, still works. And back to dark mode. So the light-dark function really simplifies our theme logic and brings it down to very few lines of CSS. In the past, we had to do at least something with media queries and duplicate our declarations of color variables, and this is just so much more compact. And it is available in all the browsers. You can start using this. I also showed you the accent color, which hasn't landed yet in Safari, but again, I think that's all right. It's a progressive enhancement that we can wait for. So coming back to our color theme, I'm not quite happy yet with the button. Let's zoom in on this. It's not interactive. If the user hovers, there's no hover color, so let's style that. Again, a little bit of new-ish syntactic sugar in CSS. We can do nesting. This is not SCSS or some other preprocessor. It is actually CSS, and nesting just works in all the browsers. And a little accessibility tip, I just have the habit of always styling focus when I style hover. I recommend that, then you don't forget about it. And keyboard users also get indication of what's happening. So I hardcode a darker purple, indigo, and it works. There's my hover state. So let's be a bit smarter here and also move this into a variable. But if I continue like this, I'll end up with quite an extensive color scheme. I can declare a million hover colors, focus, focus within colors, and so on. Let's see if we can be a bit more frugal with our variables here. And we can with the color mix function. So color mix basically works like the name says. It's like mixing colors on a palette for a painting. And I start with the base color I want to mix on. In this case, the link color, which is the background of the button. Now I add my second color. I want to make it a bit darker, so I mix in 40% black. And to make it actually come together, I have to tell it in which color space to mix it in. There we go. And we can get creative here. We can mix other colors for maybe a really standout popping hover color, like this bright red pink. Back to black for now. Still works. I want to be a bit smarter here too and not hardcode my black color. Instead, I'm going to use the color text, which happens to be also black in the light mode. And this unlocks something really powerful. Now this is fully dynamic. And usually we have more than just one button style. Let's say I have a green button as well. And I just swap out one value here in the variable. And it just works. Let's see it. There we go. And my favorite part, dark mode works as well. Because I'm referring to the text color, which in dark mode is brighter, the hover effect works as well. So I have a really short set of some base colors. And what this allows me to do is build my entire color theme based on very few base colors. I really like this because it makes sure my color theme is coherent and really refers back to the basic colors of my brand. The color mix color is also landed in all the browsers, so you can start playing around with it right now. And these neat visualizations of showing you which colors are being mixed to what percentage are actually shown in your DevTools too, which is really helpful. And that's not the only color function we have available now. Another really nice one is mixing relative colors in a color space directly. Like right here, I'm doing it in the HSL color, hue, saturation, lightness. And I can calculate on the individual values of a color. So what I'm doing here is I want a slightly brighter pink. No, actually a slightly darker pink. So I'm subtracting a bit from the L, the lightness of the color. And that's what I get. I can do that on other values as well, like age, the hue, and get a completely different color because I rotate through the color wheel. And that's where we land, on a bright green. Something that is not yet ready, but I'm super excited for it, is the contrast color function. This is a use case I have all the time because we're providing a white label app, so customers can put in any kind of color, and I'm sure you're familiar with that. And then I have to figure out a way to put a contrast color on the button that is legible for everyone. Contrast color in the future will do this for us. So we just put in the button background color, and it will return, in this case, white or black. Unfortunately, that's not there yet, but it's being very actively developed. So I hope we'll see this come to life very soon. And I think now is a good time to look at colors and talk about color contrast, because who knows what happens on June 28, quite soon? I know Katrin does. Thank you. mostly I wanted to put this beautiful German word of Barrierefreiheitsstärkungsgesetz on a slide. It's Barrierefreiheitsgesetz in Austria. And in both countries, this will come into force in just a few days. And color contrast is one of the main issues that we as developers are responsible for and can fix quite easily. So these color functions might be of help. Okay, let's move on to topic number 3, probably my favorite, the has selector, which allows us to style parent elements. When we learned CSS, something quite basic about selecting elements is what we learned probably immediately. You cannot go up. You can select an element, its siblings, or its ancestors, but not the other way around. You cannot go up the tree. Except that is changing. Let's look at an example that I'm sure you're familiar with, form validation and giving visual feedback to the user. So what we're doing today, like here, the user enters an email. It's not actually an email. Well, the input gets a visual indication that it's not valid. But maybe your designer suggests, or maybe usability just makes that necessary because your form might be really long and you want to make sure the error is still visible. You might want to highlight the entire form. But it's the parent. It doesn't know anything about what's happening with its children. So how do we do that? Let's understand the anatomy real quick before I go into the CSS. We have a form here with a label, an input, and a button. So that's the parent-children relationship here. And this is what we would do to style an invalid input element. By the way, we can use something that we just learned here to make it pop even more and give a subtle shading of the red here by mixing the color. Just take your error color and tone it down with a bit of, well, actually a lot of transparency right here. Okay, now we want to style the wrapping form though. How do we do that? We start by selecting the subject, the form, the thing that we want to style. And now the has selector comes into play. And the cool thing about the has selector, it almost is human readable, or very intuitive. The form has an invalid input. And that's when you can style it. That's when the style applies. I really like how natural this kind of reads. It makes a complex selector, for me at least, quite easy to understand. So instantly we have a bit better usability, the user has good orientation, and what I really like, I don't have to toggle on and off classes using JavaScript. I think that's a big win. Thank you. So we can do so many cool things with the has selector, and it's really changing the way how CSS authors think about their architecture, how to structure selectors. And I just want to really briefly show you some other ideas. So here I have a figure element, and inside I have an image, could actually also be an SVG or whatever. You can list elements that the has selector is listening for, and it should have a nice border. However, maybe your figure has code inside, and you want to style it completely different, depending on its content. And that's all you have to do now. Just check if there's code inside the figure. And probably my favorite example, you can build an entire light-dark mode toggle using just the has selector. So what I want to do here, I want to style the root with a dark color scheme if it has a checkbox with the ID dark that is checked. I love this. Thank you. So these are exactly these little details that empower your designers. They can do this to quickly build a prototype, including a dark light mode with very few lines. And they don't have to learn JavaScript and deal with all its complexity and all its power. So I think has is such a big deal because it enables us to build these dynamic state-based UIs without dealing with toggling classes on and off. And by doing that, we get a bit closer to true separation of concerns. The styling logic remains contained where it belongs, in the style sheet. The great news, this has been available for a really long time. It has shipped in all the browsers in December 2023. And I'm using this in production today. So I encourage you to also try it out. It really messes with your brain for a moment and then changes how you write CSS forever. Now let's look at something equally impactful, the popover API. Popovers are everywhere in our UI. That's an example from the product I'm working on. And my colleague is asking for feedback with the product here. Let's actually give him a good vote, mess up our stats. Another popover is in this little customer feedback chat bubble that you've probably seen before. More popovers show up in small account menus. You have select lists that have popovers. Popovers are really everywhere, and I'm sure you've encountered them. And then you have to think about focus management. You have to toggle visibility on and off. You have to make sure the screen reader also knows about the popover showing up, and this all gets quite tricky and involved. But now we have the popover API, and we can do all of this using only HTML. I'll show you how. Let's look at this example where we have a simple copy to clipboard button, and we get a little popover confirmation that it's copied. So first, we build our button. So far, so easy. And our popover is just a simple div with the text copied and an icon. So to initialize the popover, we add the popover attribute. So it disappears because the default state of the popover is it's not on the page, it's hidden. Let's also give it an ID so we can address it. And here comes the last magic bit. The new popover target on the button, and it targets the tooltip. And that's all you need to do to make this work. I think that's really quite brilliant. It has never been so easy. And we haven't even used CSS yet. What this does for us, we don't have to worry about z-index problems anymore. Who's written z-index 999 at some point? Yeah, so you know what I'm talking about. What popovers do, they are put into a new concept in the DOM, the top layer. That's a layer that's like adjacent to the body, and it doesn't interfere with any other elements in the body, no matter what the z-index is. So even 999 will be topped by a popover. And that's really nice to stop worrying about that. Also, it comes with some cool default actions. If I click outside of the popover, it'll light dismiss. If I hit escape, the same happens. I don't have to build this myself. User focus is also controlled. So as soon as this opens, the focus is in there, which means the popover API is more powerful than just little tooltips. You can make an entire dialog like this or a complex menu. So great accessibility wins built in. The popover attribute is ready to be used. Now, you might have noticed I cleverly positioned the button right below the center of the page, because by default, the popover opens in the center. And that's often not what we want. In this case, the tooltip should be connected to the thing that triggers it. So let's see how we can improve this, because what we want is something like that. So here I dive into CSS, and I have to make these two elements know about each other. And that's where I use a brand new CSS property, anchor name. That will be my anchor now. And I give it a freely chosen name. The only thing you have to take care of is stick to this dash dash syntax here. Now the tooltip gets told who is its position anchor. Well, the copy button that we just named. And now they're connected, they're tethered to each other. And we can start moving it around. To do that, first, we have to absolute position it, and just for good measure, I take off any margins and any insets, which means top, right, left, and so on, to remove any other default styling that comes from the browser. And now, I move it to the center of its anchor by setting its left to the center of the anchor. That's new, but kind of makes sense. Also, I want to move it closer to the button, so I attach the bottom of my popover to the top of my anchor. It's not actually centered yet, so I use an old CSS trick. I translated 50% to the side. Now it's centered. And I also gave it a bit of margin on the block axis, so it's not glued to the button. I know that's a lot, so let's look at the anchors and where they are in detail real quick. So I have a top, a center, and a bottom anchor on the block axis of my anchor. And I have the same left, center, right on the inline axis. And that means I can now freely tie my tooltip to any position of the anchor. I think that's pretty neat. Okay, now unfortunately, it gets more complicated. If my button is in a stupid position like this, well, then the anchor gets cut off and I can't read it anymore. And believe it or not, CSS solves that for us now. The new thing we're getting is called position try fallbacks. And you can define fallbacks for your anchor positioned element. And there are some ready-to-go properties like flip block. Let's see how that works. It just flips on the block axis and tries out the next available spot. And this one line is all you have to do. You probably remember the JavaScript you had to debug in the previous times to do this. I love this. I ran into rabbit holes doing this with JavaScript. So if you now move it around and the space on top becomes available again, that's where your popover switches to. By the way, I keep talking about block and inline axis. These are just the left-right agnostic terms to speak about the reading direction that's relevant for the language we're talking about. So these are the available ways to define fallbacks. We have flip block, flip inline, flip start is actually the combination of both of these properties. And I can define my custom property locations as well in case you want to do something wild and position it completely different. And you can combine them. In that case, the browser will just go through all the fallbacks. If you want 10 fallbacks, you can do that. Now, anchor positioning isn't quite ready yet. It's there in Chromium, but not in Firefox and also not in Safari. However, it is on the list to be finished as part of the interop agreement between all the browser vendors, which means they're actively working on it, and we can expect this to be shipped by the end of the year. Position try fallbacks has the same issue. However, this is the future. This is how things will work. And I think it's time that we start questioning our habits of reaching for JavaScript to solve problems like that. So I recommend to try playing with this today. And here's a really good polyfill maintained by Miriam Suzanne of Oddbirds. She's providing a lot of polyfills for future CSS properties. So it works really well. Try it out today and try breaking your JavaScript habits. The last quick bit is how to make this really smooth. Because something is not quite right yet about our little pop-up here. It just flips in and out really harshly. And I want something more sophisticated. Let's make it fade in and out and disappear to the top. Should be easy, right? We have CSS transitions. So I would expect something like this to work. Except it doesn't. I have to allow discrete animations first. And what does that mean? The popover API, as we saw earlier, displays the popover into the top layer, and with display none takes it out again. And display has an animation type of discrete, which basically means it's kind of binary. It's on or off. It's displayed or not. So what should the browser do with that? It would know how to animate between these states, right? So as soon as display is part of any transition, all the other transitions will be canceled out. In case you've run into this before, anyone? Yeah, me too, definitely. It's been driving me wild. So let's see what this allow discrete does now. Let's add opacity and give it a default state of opacity 0. It's not visible. And when the popover is open, which you can address with this new pseudo class, popover open, give it a full opacity, so it's there. The animation didn't run. Anyway, it is only working in one direction like this. It smoothly fades out now, but then pops in right away. So for some reason, my initial transition was only working in one direction. And that's why we have to add this new add rule, add starting style. The reason that it wasn't working before is the popover doesn't know where to start from, how to enter the stage, so to say. And the starting style fixes that. Let's see. There we go. It fades in and out. Quite nice. Now the last bit of extra fun. let's make it slide using the translate property. You only have to care about the second value here. The -50 was just to center it. On the y-axis, I tell it to start a little bit below its final position at 0, and then slide out to minus. Let's see it. There we have it. Our final popover animated. In real life, you probably want to do this a bit faster. Like, we don't want our users to fall asleep. That was just so slow for the demo. That was kind of a lot. I see some confused faces, so let's walk through this real quick again. I start by setting up my transition and make sure it allows for discrete. Then I kind of start at the bottom when writing this. I define where the popover is coming in from, how it gets on the stage. Then I style how it is on stage. It gets presentation moment, and then I tell it how to go out. And that's really all that's needed to do a quite nice and pretty looking transition. Transition behavior, allow discrete, is ready to be used. You can start playing around with it. And so is add starting style. Let's very quickly remind ourselves of what we looked at today. I shared this little one-liner for instantly improved typography. We looked at colors and dark light mode theming, and then we got to meet the parent selector, has. And in the last few minutes, we talked about popover, how to position it, and how to transition it. By doing all of this in CSS only, we get free accessibility features ready for us. We only have to make sure they actually work and not skip the testing, of course, but we don't have to build them from scratch. Modern CSS also can empower your team to contribute in the medium where the UI is happening, which can be so helpful and better tie your dev and design team together. And lastly, it's a huge time saver. I'm really glad I can use all of these things today and can get rid of so many third-party libraries and stop dealing with more complexity from a more powerful language. So this really brings us closer to that founding principle of the web. Use the least powerful language, because those not so powerful tools might actually be the most flexible, really robust, and just really good at their job. I think CSS is awesome. So, thank you.
What a great talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You did amaze. I saw Mark Henry sitting there completely in awe, like it seems to solve a lot of his problems. He was...
Imagine implementing this.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, thanks a lot. We got some questions for you.
Cool.
One of them being, can the light dark option be used to offer a high contrast mode to the user in the sense of the Barrierefreiheitsstärkungsgesetz?
Sorry, say the last part again.
Can the light dark option be used to offer a high contrast mode to the user in the sense of the new law, Barrierefreiheitsstärkungsgesetz?
Got it. So the light dark function only supports those two values and only reacts to the light dark mode. I think that might be referring to the user preference of high contrast. And there is a media query where you can target that preference specifically, but the function doesn't cover it. So you can definitely support it by authoring a separate set of colors for high contrast, but you still have to use a media query.
Thank you. What's your opinion on focus versus focus visible?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. I used focus to not bring in yet another concept, but focus visible is super cool. There's this annoying bit that you probably all know as well, where you click on a button and gets the blue outline, which for a click device you don't need. You don't want that. That usually looks ugly. But if you tab through the page, you definitely want a very visible outline. And focus visible targets only when the user is actually tabbing through the page. So focus visible, super useful pseudo class. Definitely use it.
Perfect. Next one combines two of my favorite features you called here is, can you nest has?
You can definitely nest it inside a selector. I don't think you can have a has inside a has. I have to try this out. What you can do is you can chain has. So you can, for example, do has not and check for the negative. So you can do cool stuff like kind of a complementary pair of selectors. Something has not. But yeah, good question. I'll double check that.
Perfect. And then one last question here. Are CSS frameworks still gonna be needed, or are they gonna become obsolete?
Yeah, I've been wondering that for a long time. I'm actually not a huge user of frameworks because the project I've been working on has been the same for many years, and by now it's pretty much all written from scratch. And sometimes I wish that wasn't the case, so I wouldn't have to do everything myself. As CSS gets more powerful, it also gets more complex, and I think frameworks can be super helpful to take some of the work in building these complex CSS functions. So yeah, I think there's probably going to be a place, and frameworks like Tailwind have been super popular, and I use them too for small projects, and yeah, I think it's fine to use them. Don't think they're going away.
Perfect. So if we have time for another one or two questions, we've got plenty of them.
I see a hand against the light.
Yeah. So the question is, let me just repeat, if the has selector only targets itself or also the children?
Yeah. So I wouldn't say target, but what it selects is always the element you want to style. Like if you remember the example, you select the form because that's where you want to see your styles applied. But the selector only matches if there is the element inside. Does that make sense? So the element inside will not be styled. That's just the thing you're listening to, that you're looking out for. Is it there or not?
So if the form itself has a class invalid, you check for has.invalid, it doesn't take the form.
Yeah, exactly. In that case, if you have the class, sorry, I'll repeat.
Yeah.
So if the form also has the class invalid, and you put that into has, then that's not going to work. What this would do is see if a children has the class invalid.
Very good, very good. For other questions that haven't been answered so far, please approach Kristina directly after the talk. I think you'll be happy to talk to everyone here. There's a lot of things to know. It was a great talk. Thank you very, very much. We also got a present for you, of course. Let me grab that. Which is the honey.
Thank you. I was hoping for the N.
Of course, in the N.
Thanks so much. I really love this. I'm definitely going to bring this home and enjoy this. So thanks so much for having me. So
Absolutely. So we'll have a small break now. Afterwards, we'll have on this stage Roland and Felix talking about letting editors go wild. And on studio stage, we have Eric with Kiss Search. And in case anyone wants some ice cream popsicle, drop by at the Format D booth and you'll grab some. Don't forget to rate the talk. Thank you.